This motherboard here is the Z490 Aorus Pro AX. Now I think this is the best Z490 motherboard coming out of Gigabyte and Aorus's whole lineup in the Z490 stack. And I've also tested the Aorus Master here as well as the Gigabyte Vision G. And this one here, the reason why I'm going to be picking it out of the other two motherboards against those is that it's the better value option. I feel that it's loaded with features and it does a really good job of overclocking, where it's coming in at a price point of $270 US, but then also in Australia it's coming in at 477 AUD. So if you want, I believe, what is a top tier board and handles a 5.2 gigahertz 10900K overclock with doing so with pretty good efficiency levels, then this would be the board to consider. And the first reason for this is that they're using a 13 phase, that's 12 plus 1 phase, where 12 phases are dedicated towards the CPU, and this is direct drive MOSFETs. Now, when we tested out the 10900K at 5.2 gigahertz, this was scoring 264 watts, which was actually coming close to that of the Z490 Velociter, which I tested here on the channel, as well as the MSI Z490 Meg Ace. And we've got a Z490 comparison coming up where we're going to round up all these boards in a video, but these are some pretty good numbers, as well as the temperatures themselves, where we saw a maximum surface temperature of 85 degrees, and then on the VRM readout in the software, we saw 85 degrees as well, and 63 degrees on the heatsink surface temperatures. Of course, out of the box, if you just want to run it at 4.9 gigahertz all cores on 10 cores, this will juice it to around 197 watts. Anything over these levels, you do start to lose a lot of efficiency with the 10900K, but this board definitely makes up for a little bit of that using a very quality, good VRM solution. You've also got tantalum caps on board, which is something that I do really like. However, with the heatsink design, it weighs in at roughly 175 grams, so it is a little bit lighter than the other solutions, and that does leave the temperatures to go a little bit hotter than some of the other boards here, but anything, in my opinion, under 90 degrees 24/7 is a good choice, and they've done a good job of implementing that. We've also got an 8+4 pin connectors up the top here, but even for my testing here, I'm only using a single 8-pin connector, and we don't go anywhere near that because we've got thick gauge wiring on our HX 1000 watt power supply. So for the VRM, they've got an excellent implementation here, which is slightly more efficient and better than that of the Vision G, but they've also included features on the back here like Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. Though moving through the onboard audio here, we've got a frequency response curve that's pretty much completely flat, minus 2.3 decibel drop off with 10 hertz and under. So again, we'll power those mid-range cans absolutely fine with a pretty clear signal. And in terms of crosstalk, that was minus 89 decibels, which is excellent. And then for noise suppression on the mic, they do have this, and it's very tricky because this is the first time I've noticed it's what I would call active noise suppression. I actually haven't seen this before this board, where it's tricky to actually find out that it's using noise suppression, where I only found out by plugging in my old Japanese 1980s vintage mic, and you could see once you unplugged it, it then had to readjust. And in that time, it was learning the noise profile and canceling that out even while you talk the words. So it is a better generation and reiteration of noise suppression, but that being said, it still is noise suppression. So it will lower the quality of your voice by a little bit. But the benefit of that is your friends you're gaming with online and people you're just talking to online are going to get a very clear voice coming through. It's just in the quality of things, noise suppression does take a frequency out there that will affect the quality of the voice recordings. So the onboard audio checks out absolutely fine. Now moving through the BIOS, this is another thing I like about this board in particular, was that it was a good experience. I couldn't fault anything from the base line. It's very simple to use. Overclocking was a breeze, and there was no problems like I actually found on the Vision G when I was checking out that BIOS. So they've implemented a more stable BIOS this time around with the Aorus Pro AX. And also in the BIOS itself, you've got the Smart Fan utility, which can tune each of the total 8 PWM fan headers and their speeds. With that being said, I would like to see RGB control within the BIOS itself, and you've also got a 5 and 12 volt RGB headers down the bottom and up the top for 4 in total. Though running through the PCiE slots, we've got three 16X slots where the top one is actually only the true 16X, and then the one below that 8X, and then the one at the bottom 4X, and then the two in between 1X slots are also there. And in terms of M.2 connectivity, we've got three M.2 X4 slots, though the top one is reserved for PCiE 4, then the bottom two are PCiE 3.0. And testing out the speeds and temperatures, they were absolutely fine, and we saw a maximum temperature of 51 degrees, so they're doing a good job on the heatsink implementation there. Then moving through the back of the board here, we've got the Wi-Fi 6 connection point with its own included standalone antenna, 10 USB ports in total, one of those being a USB 3.2 Type-C, and then we've also got a 2.5G NIC. You've also got a single HDMI 1.4 out and no PS2 port, but manual 5.1 surround out and an optical out for your audio. And after all that, it's time to segue into a conclusion for you guys where this board has it all. The VRM solution's really good, the feature set, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5, and also the heatsink design is a fin type design, so if you want to even go crazy on the overclocks, you can put a fan on that and it will respond well. The BIOS is also really stable on this particular motherboard, and testing out DDR4 4400 MHz memory worked absolutely fine, as well as the overclocks on the 10900K working absolutely fine too. Then we've got the clean black aesthetic. This is another thing that I'm personally digging about this board, is that it's just got such a nice look to it, and I think it's going to go well with any type of build that you're doing. And of course, who could forget about a little bit of RGB, which you've got on the left-hand side, both the top and bottom. So flipping the board around now, I really like this one for that premium value. If that's kind of going to be a segment, I think for me personally, that would be a segment, because you're getting everything out of this board that you would want on the premium range, but you're going away with things like a fancy backplate on the rear of the board and saving costs. And so I like the fact they've included tantalum caps. The BIOS responds really well to overclocking. You've got really good onboard audio, 2.5G NIC, all this other stuff that is feature packed, and it doesn't break the bank too much. 270 USD that can handle their mainstream flagship CPU overclock to the brink is a really good feat. But in terms of its efficiency as well, it's also coming close to that of the Z490 PG Velociter, which when I first took a look at that, I was really impressed with that too. I'll put the link to that review up here. But in terms of the Z490 comparison, this one is definitely going to be near the top of the list. I can tell you that now before we even go into that comparison, and I do like this board against the Vision G and also the Aorus Master, which I've already tested both of those here at the studio. So this one is the one to get from Gigabyte. It's got the hardware, it's got the feature set, but they've also done a good job this time around with the BIOS and how they've implemented the stability. And that's about it for today's review. If you guys enjoyed this one, then be sure to hit that like button for us, or should I say Aorus, and also let us know in the comment section below. That was a bad joke, wasn't it? And anyway, let us know in the comment section below what you think of the aesthetic, what you think of the results for this board, and also what you think of a price point in terms of a motherboard. What are you looking for if you go with budget or premium? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Raw Denime. And they ask 1.5 volt, how did it not fry? And they're referring to the previous Vision G review that we did, where that was taking the motherboard to really crazy voltages. Now, one thing as well, with Z490, do not overclock the CPU and leave the voltages on auto. In the past, I've seen different motherboards handle this all, but in general, Z490s are really just going crazy with the auto voltages. And so it will take it to crazy levels. And basically the reason why it doesn't fry is because I identify straight away, whenever you test out any CPU out of the box, always get a baseline with the power consumption it's using. So for instance, the 10900K, that's using around 190 to 200 watts at 4.9 gigahertz all core. So there's your baseline. Now, if you go up to 5.2 gigahertz and suddenly, like some of these boards, they're drawing 350 watts, you know that that's just a stupid amount of extra wattage for really little performance gain. So you know straight away, okay, I've got to tune this down, I've got to take things down, and I've got to turn off the stress test straight away, otherwise you could risk frying your CPU, and that's how simple it is. So basically always get that baseline and then go from there. So around 260 watts is where it goes for 5.2 gigahertz all core. That's a pretty fair level, it's pretty much topping out at that, and I won't go that much higher, especially for 24/7 use. And that pretty much does it for today's video. If you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that content and you want to see it the moment it drops, then be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.